Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Next Gen Planners podcast. My name is Dan, and I'm the head of community experience here at Next Gen Planners. And today I am very, very excited to have on the show someone that I've been wanting to get on the show for ages, but we've just never got around to doing it. We've finally got her on. That's Jenny Madhoo from SpringGen Advice. How are you doing today, Jenny?
Hello. Yes, I'm great. Thank you. Very excited to be chatting to you as well.
That's good. There was an element of northernness in that hello there. I quite like it. It's good. It makes me feel like I'm at home, which is good.
There's no northern in me, so I'm not sure where that's coming from.
Yeah, I didn't think there was. I don't know where that came from, but that was nice. So for anyone who doesn't know Jenny in the audience, she is a financial planner at SpringGen Advice, and she's got a really cool story, really cool ethos, and some very big plans about what she's going to be doing as well. So I'm very excited to have her on. Jenny, we used to ask the question of our guests, which was, can you tell us your journey so far? But what we found was that people have got quite long journeys, and at the end, it takes quite a long time to explain them. So I've changed that question a little bit to now, what do you do on a daily basis? Take us through a day. And I know that no 2 days are probably the same, but what do you get up to on a daily basis?
Sure. So I wear two hats kind of interchangeably on a daily basis, really, because I've obviously have SpringGen Advice, in which I'm the sole planner at the moment. But I also work for Acumen Financial Planning, which is a more traditional, in inverted commas, financial planning company. So they're kind of sister companies to one another, and I'm a financial planner in both of them. So on a daily basis, I'm splitting my time between the two of those companies, you know, talking to either potential new clients or having a mixture of new client meetings or review meetings with existing clients, and currently splitting time between working from home and office working. So some meetings are face-to-face, some meetings are video meetings. I'm also, SpringGen is still relatively young. So we've been up and running for just over a year. So I'm still spending quite a lot of time building SpringGen services and processes and how that all looks behind the scenes. So still spend quite a lot of time on that, and also training new SpringGen team members on SpringGen processes and software, all of those kind of things, and a bit of content writing in there, mixed in there somewhere for marketing team as well.
Wow. There's a lot in there. I think the thing I want to pick up on before we move on is the kind of splitting of your time. You know, the majority of people in their working lives only do one thing at a time. Where personally speaking, I've done, you know, at the moment I'm doing like 3 or 4 things at a time. So it's interesting how each individual person kind of deals with that split. How, just very quickly before we move on, how do you deal with that split? Like, how do you find kind of dealing with that split between 2 different businesses in your case?
Well, when they line up well and one thing's slightly more quiet and one thing's slightly more busy, then it's great. But I'm sure you have this experience as well. It doesn't often line up neatly like that. So sometimes it is a little bit like pulling your hair out kind of days. And it can be difficult to switch from one to the other. So I find you just have to be really on top of like organizing yourself and organizing your diary. Blocking out time for certain things is my main way to deal with that.
Yeah, I think that's a good piece. I mean, there's loads of bits of advice that we could give about that one, but I think we'll focus on something different today. We could perhaps do a different podcast on that one. It would be good. So, like you mentioned before, SpringGen is still very, very young in respect to, you know, in comparison to other financial planning businesses out there, which is good. You know, it's exciting. So I'm very interested to hear about the first year of actually launching that kind of modern financial planning business, because, you know, there's a few of them popping up every now and again, and it's good to hear how they're getting on. So on the positive side, because we always like to start with the good news, what have been some of the best bits in the past year or so of launching that that modern financial planning business?
Well, the very act of launching it was a pretty big high point in itself, because I was pitching it to my kind of Acumen board of directors 12 months before that, and it was all lovely ideas on paper, and to take that and turn it into a real life business was really hard work, but really exciting and satisfying, when you can actually see it, and it has a real website and you start talking to real people that might become your clients. Really exciting. So the launch was huge. And then every time someone joins as a new client, it's a little kick, because you're like, yeah, like someone wants this service that I have created, and someone is getting something beneficial out of this, which is, that buzz doesn't go away. In fact, even on a meeting by meeting basis, like sometimes you'll have, like this happened to me last week, you might be a little bit nervous about in the lead up to a meeting because it's, I don't know, just a bit complex, the case or whatever it is. And then you come out of the meeting and you're like buzzing, because you're like, that just went really, really well. And they found it really helpful, and it just reminds you why you love doing it. So I still get that kick on, from individual meetings. New people coming into the SpringGen team as well, also gives you a kick, because it just reminds you why you feel so strongly about it when you're showing it to someone else. So those are my main high points, I'd say, from over the last 12 months.
It's really good. I think the point about worrying about a meeting and then actually turning out to be really, really good is something that happens in pretty much everyone's lives, isn't it? The stuff that you kind of are most scared about, in the end it comes out actually being quite rewarding.
Yeah.
Which is good. Anyone who's watching will notice I've got a smile on my face. That smile might go now, because we're going to focus on the challenges. So I'm assuming that launching a modern financial planning business is not easy. I've never done it personally, but I've seen some people do it, and I know the kind of challenges that they go through. Can you just talk us through a few of your challenges? What's been the biggest challenges over the past year or so of launching SpringGen?
Yeah. So the first main challenge that I came up against was pre-launch, I would say. And that was when I was doing my research and due diligence, mainly around platforms. And this was, bear in mind, pre-COVID that I was doing this research. It would have been like during I think must have been summer 2019. And it was like banging your head up against a brick wall, because I knew that I wanted SpringGen to be a completely digital company. And at that time, the amount of platforms that were willing to entertain a docu-signature, if that's a word, on a form was like so thin on the ground, it was unbelievable. And suddenly, the world and his wife now accepts DocuSign purely out of necessity because of what's happened with COVID, which peeved me a bit, because all these companies are turning around and being like, look how modern we are, we're accepting all this. And I'm thinking, well, I asked you this question a few months ago and you were dead set against it, had no plans to introduce it. So come on. But so yeah, that was my first challenge, kind of teething issues and trying to find companies that could actually facilitate what I was envisaging. We got there in the end. A next pretty big challenge that I had, and I think I might have mentioned this in the talk I did at the Next Gen conference last year. We actually launched SpringGen under a different name, and found out pretty quickly that someone else was using that name in the financial services space. So we had to rebrand, redesign all our documents, pause on all social media, all marketing, everything for, God, a good 6 weeks, which is so painful. Like when you're brand new and you've only just launched, you're like champing at the bit to start promoting yourself. And we had to undo all of that. And poor marketing team had to like rebrand every single document. So that was a big rookie error. So check the trademarks register if you're starting your own business. It's a big tip from me.
Yeah. I think that is a really good tip, actually, and it's surprisingly perhaps one that more people make that mistake than you would probably imagine. I think it goes beyond just doing a trademark check as well. I think, rather than just looking on the first page of Google to see if that exists, really go through Companies House, go through 10, 11 pages of Google, and look through every single one to make sure that this doesn't exist. And it could save yourself, that 25 minutes that you do that could save you, like you said, a massive kind of problem down the line as well. I mean, I wish there was just something out there though that, and I'm not just saying this actually genuinely doesn't exist as far as I'm aware, that just lists all of the businesses that are even out there. I know we're never going to have that because some people start businesses and then never actually launch them. But it would be so much easier if life was like that. But we know that life doesn't go in straight lines, don't we? So never mind.
Exactly.
So your tagline at SpringGen then, and we can proudly call it SpringGen because no other business out there exists, is that organizing your money should be exciting. So that's your tagline. I love it. Obviously, anything with exciting in, I'm like instantly there. So I'm interested though of how that kind of process runs out. So how do you introduce excitement for your clients when you're talking about money? Is it you that introduces that excitement, or is it you tease it out of them in the conversations that you have?
I think hopefully a bit of both, because obviously it's something that I am passionate about. So you do bring a certain amount of energy to the conversation, but it's not the easiest thing to get someone excited about who's sort of nervous about it or just a bit oblivious to it all. So what I try and do is kind of reframe the conversation, because people, when they come to you, they're kind of focused totally on the investment piece, and that's maybe because that's the piece that's kind of worrying them the most, because they think, or they know they want to do something about it, but they don't really know what to do, which is why they've come to you. So I kind of ask, go through all the normal fact finding process, but kind of try and take the emphasis away from the investment piece and more onto like, what is this money for? Like, tell me a bit about where you see yourself in X number of years time, and what this is all contributing towards, and kind of get them to kind of give you a bit of insight in that way into their life. And hopefully, that brings out a bit of excitement in them, because depending on what the goal is that they're talking about, it's something that's important to them. And then also it's trying to keep up momentum as well, because obviously doing things digitally through SpringGen, you can get things done a bit quicker and keep that kind of enthusiasm going. Once you've spent an hour on a Zoom call with someone, you don't have to then spend 2 weeks writing up reports and another week waiting for it to reach them in the post, and then another week for it to come back to you, etc., etc. It's all much more, it's not instantaneous because there's still manual work in the background that has to be done, but it's much quicker, and you can keep up that momentum, like I say, after a meeting as well.
It's really good. I love it. I guess as well, because the people that you're serving, which we'll get onto a bit later, is the primarily younger target audience. So although they've probably got a bit more to worry about because they're young and they're less wealthy than the people who are traditional financial planning clients, they've also got a lot more to be excited about as well. And I think by you spending time with them to show them what they've got excited about, that does make organizing their money exciting, because you're literally showing them, if you do this right now, think of all the things that you could do in the future. And there's nothing more exciting than that, which is good. And you mentioned in that last answer there that you're digital. I think your comment before about the coronavirus and the pandemic and those platform providers who said, oh, look how amazing we are because we now accept DocuSign. And in reality, financial planners have been doing this for probably near enough 10 years. And now they were trying to use this as a marketing plot to say, yeah. I'm not going to talk about that. But how have you found that? I mean, I guess 100% digital. I know, I understand what you mean, because that's you are 100% digital. Obviously, there's perhaps sometimes some forms or something that clients may perhaps need to sign and things. We'll never get away from that as long as platform providers exist, that were designed in the 1980s. But how have you found the 100% digital side? What benefits has it provided you in your business?
Well, it allowed us to launch in the beginning of 2020 and not have to cancel everything after 6 weeks, for one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like I said, we always planned to be digital. That was part of the reason why I wanted to create a new business. But COVID was kind of like proof that it could work, I suppose. So it was never intended to be any other way. But with COVID coming along, if it was supposed to be in person, I wouldn't have been able to launch a new business during the last year, because it wouldn't have happened. It's just been, I struggle to think of a downside, to be honest, because it means that I'm based in Aberdeenshire, right? But SpringGen has clients all over the country already. That could never happen if you weren't doing things digitally. It's so convenient for people. They can have a meeting right at the end of the day after they finish work, or first thing in the morning, or on their lunch break, or when people in their 20s or 30s, you can't just step out of the office for half a day in the same way you can when you're the boss in your 50s or 60s. Whereas if you can carve out 45 minutes and you'd have to move from your desk, it means you can have a Zoom meeting pretty much any time of day.
Yeah.
So I haven't had any negative feedback about the fact that we do all our meetings on Zoom, that we don't send them in paper in the post. And to be honest, for the large part now, there's hardly any paper that has to go back and forth. Maybe in if it's third-party contributions to an investment or something, and it needs a wet ink signature, but for your kind of more standard case, there's usually 0 pieces of actual paper that need to go around. So the convenience level is just mega.
It is.
And I haven't had anyone, question why can't we come into the office and see, why do we not do it face-to-face? There's been no issue.
I'm just thinking about, that's fantastic. I mean, I was smiling throughout that because I love this. And I was thinking back to a conversation I had last year with George Kinder. And he was talking about that kind of the drive to a financial planning meeting. I mean, it's still in the kind of mindset of that we have to have in-person financial planning meetings, and all the things that you're going through in your head. And will the financial planner ask me this? Will the financial planner ask me that? Whereas, when you're 100% digital, you don't have the stress of having to drive somewhere. You don't have the stress of having to find parking. You don't have so when people arrive to your meetings on Zoom, there's a higher likelihood that they're in a comfortable environment already, because they're not sweating because they've had to come up the stairs because the elevator's broken. They're not stressed about the fact that they couldn't find a parking space and have had to park 6 miles away. All that kind of stuff is just gone. And you certainly do lose some body language elements and things like that. There's no getting away from that. But are they outweighed by the benefits of being in a comfortable environment? And it'll be interesting to see if there was some research about that. If we could have that kind of research, that'd be good. I mean, you're a kind of, you are a case study for the fact that Zoom meetings and having 100% digital business can work, which is good. And again, we mentioned that it has a lot to do with the kind of target audience that you're going for. So we know that, well, I know the audience might not know that you deal with a primarily younger target audience. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, SpringGen kind of gives it away, doesn't it? But when we focus on them and the kind of things that they want from you, have you seen some patterns about, what they need in terms of life planning that would perhaps benefit the people in the audience who have never worked with those types of clients before but want to? What do those type of clients need, and what are the kind of general patterns that you find they look for?
So some things that have come up certainly much more frequently and with a SpringGen kind of client base than I've had much exposure to, with my other hat on as a more traditional financial planner. So you get people that are both sides of their first step onto the property ladder. So people that haven't yet bought a property, and that's kind of their biggest short-term goal or short to medium-term goal. And then you get people who are just onto the property ladder. Their whole kind of adult life so far has been saving up towards a deposit. Now they've done that. Where the hell do they go next? So lifetime ISAs is quite a common topic for SpringGen people, and not something I'd had to really think about too much before. So you need to bone up on lifetime ISAs, I would say. Also, a lot more people with either personal loans or credit card debt, which again is not an area that your typical kind of financial planning client in their 50s or 60s, you'll see that often. So that's a much more common thing that comes up. People either have them or have questions about them. And generally speaking, I'd say people that are coming to me through SpringGen, they're educated, they've done some research, and they tend to know a little bit about a random smattering of things. Like they've heard of an ETF or an index fund. Like the amount of times someone says the word ETF to me. So they've sort of heard of it, they've got these buzzwords, but they don't really know where to go with it. And there's gaps in between ETF and me that I don't know how to, like ETF and them, they don't really know how to fill in. Like, what do I do about it? How do I get one? Do you know what I mean? So a lot of it is kind of helping people fill in the gaps.
A lot of financial education, which is good. I'm assuming that, I don't know if you missed this out on purpose or whether you've generally never been asked about it, but cryptocurrency as well. I mean, the regulator is quite clear on it at the moment and stuff like that, isn't it? So it's a weird area to go down. But do you get asked? I mean, just to kind of take a different route here, do you find that people are asking about that and are concerned by it?
To be honest, people mention it a lot, and a reasonable handful of SpringGen clients have cryptocurrency. But to be honest, it's not something people have asked for my advice about. They tend to come to me already having done it. Or if they're going to do it, they're kind of dealing with that separately, and which I think is a good sign, because most people are kind of seeing as a little ancillary thing on the side rather than, can I invest my pension in cryptocurrency kind of situation. So they're looking to SpringGen to, help them set up. For example, they're maybe like a young entrepreneur and they want to set up a workplace pension for themselves, or they need some insurance or those kind of things. So SpringGen, we're helping them with that, and they want to go and, I hesitate to use the word play around, but have a bit of crypto dabble on the side. Then they go away and do that, and no one's really pushed me that hard to give like an opinion or recommendation on cryptocurrency. Good. Which is fortunate so far.
I was going to say, I bet you're thanking your lucky stars that no one has asked you for that. I often think about this, and I think I try to think back to the Dan of, it would have been 5 years ago now, who, before he entered finance, he didn't even know what an ISA was. He didn't know what a fund was, didn't know what pensions were. And if I saw cryptocurrency, I would probably not be interested in it, because I'm thinking, it's just another thing for me to know, or another thing for me to be confused about. And I'm really interested to see how that kind of space develops, because I still think there's such a lack of financial education about the actual regulated things, as in, pensions and investments, the clean things, shall we say, versus the things that could potentially, I'm saying here, potentially turn out to be dirty, which, cryptocurrency and all the kind of alternative investments out there as well. Yeah. So it's fascinating to hear that. I'm looking forward to seeing how that develops over the next few years as well.
Yeah, me too, for sure.
But from talking to those people who are, quite younger, on the younger end, I'm really interested into what they think about financial planning and how their perspective is changed when they realize what it actually is. Because I would imagine that, I mean, I certainly had this kind of opinion before I entered finance, which was that financial advisors very stuffy, very salesy, the kind of traditional reputation that financial advisors got.
Mm.
Um, what are you what from talking to your guys, what would you say their perspective is on the financial planning profession?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think as it stands, a lot of SpringGen clients that we have do have some sort of indirect connection to or awareness of financial planning, primarily because a family member of theirs generally has a financial planner, because there's some connection to the wider group of companies that SpringGen's part of that's brought them to our doorstep. So there's a certain amount of kind of background awareness. And like I say, like a lot of people have done some research because there is a loads of information out there. But they need that last bit of like tailor all this information to me to actually take the step. So I think there's plenty of people out there who want financial advice and need it. I would say, excuse me, there's a hesitation or a certain amount of like caution that people display about paying up for professional services. And I do wonder whether that's, at this stage of life, people just aren't accustomed to doing that because you've maybe never had to use a solicitor by that point in your life, or you've never had to use an accountant or a professional service like that before. So there's a kind of, I don't know if it's hesitancy to, pay for a service, or maybe it's because the kind of crypto side of thing is such a like DIY approach and people feel like they should be able to do it on their own without that kind of advice piece. But so I think there's a reasonable understanding of what financial advice is. But then it's the next step of people actually taking it up.
That's really interesting. I think personally it does have something to do with the fact that they've never had to pay for anything like this before. From a personal perspective, this is not directly analogous, but we're trying to get some AstroTurf fitted in our back garden at the moment, and some of the quotes that have been coming through have literally nearly made me, fall off my desk chair because I'm thinking, I just can't see the value. Like but I know it's not directly analogous because we know that fitting AstroTurf in the back garden is imminently less valuable than financial planning can be. But I do think there's an element to it of these are sometimes the first big payments that they've had to. No one sees a mortgage as a big payment because it's just too big to even comprehend. But those little things where you have to pay now, those are really scary. And I think it does take some time to get into the habit of accepting that you're going to have to pay those at some points throughout your life. Yeah. But I mean, it's not completely like that because you guys at SpringGen as well. This is kind of verging off a little bit, and this wasn't in the questions, but you have got the kind of aim of making it affordable as well for people. I'm interested to see how does that, I'm not going to say how does that work from a kind of fee perspective, but I'm thinking, have you seen the kind of take up in that? Because I know that there's a very small amount that people can pay a month to have access to your services. Has that kind of, does that reduce the barriers to entry to your services, do you think, for people?
Well, I absolutely think that it does. And it's maybe not even so much that the cost was a high barrier before. It was just kind of like, well, you can either access it or you can't, because financial planning firms just wouldn't entertain the idea of providing a service to someone, with less than X amount of assets, which obviously all SpringGen people are, average is well below six figures. Like, remind me what the start of your question was again.
I'd say, do you do you find that it's kind of reducing the barrier to entry
Mm.
for finance? Because I know that was your aim, wasn't it? It's to kind of to close that, and we're going to talk about this in the next question, which is to close the advice gap and allow
Yeah,
more
yes,
people to access it. Do you think that
yeah,
it's doing that?
yeah. I hope so. But it can be a slippery slope, and it's difficult. It's not easy to find the right balance between being able to offer a service to people and be commercial. I totally get that, and I'm not going to sit here and say SpringGen has the magic recipe, because we're still super new ourselves and we're working out as we go. Yeah. So it's really not an easy one, and it, like I said, it's a slippery slope. Like once you start offering at a certain level, and then if you're always going to get pushback from some people, right? It's not, you know, some people always want something for free. And you can sort of think, oh God, is it still priced too high? Is it this, is it that? What if I just reduce it a little bit more? Will it be better? Blah, blah, blah. But then you have to have like a commercial hat on at the same time. So that is a difficult balance to strike. And with SpringGen, it's kind of resulted in us like niching down even more, like who we're trying to serve, because, you know, in the same way a traditional financial planning firm doesn't serve every single person over the age of 50, we can't serve every single person between the ages of 20 and 45. Like you have to accept that whatever price you charge is still going to be too much for some people, but then that's okay. That's just not your target audience. So it's a kind of constantly evolving process in that respect.
It's a good answer. It is. It's very clear. The main point is that you're actually doing something, which is all we can ask for, which is good. And we mentioned that one of your aims is to plug the advice gap. I think perhaps some people might not be aware what the advice gap actually means, because there's a kind of synonymy of terms, which is the advice gap and the advisor gap, both of which are very, very different problems. But the advice gap refers to the kind of consumers, and the actual direct to consumer, as in, you know, there's not enough people out there getting quality financial advice. And if we could plug that advice gap and give more people quality advice, the you know, results down the line could be absolutely enormous in terms of wealth and future wealth and stuff like that. How optimistic are you personally that there will be a solution in the future where everyone in the UK has access to quality financial advice?
I'm fairly optimistic. I'm definitely hopeful there will be a solution, but it doesn't mean it's going to be a solution for everyone, because like I say, there's always some people that aren't going to be willing to pay for advice, and that's fine, because you, as long as you can choose whether to or not, that's okay. You know, not everyone is going to get advice in the UK, because like I said, in the same way that not every person over the age of 50 takes advice right now, it's unrealistic, I think, to think, you know, every single millennial in the UK is going to be paying for financial advice, because some people feel they don't need it, some people just don't want it, some people are not willing to pay for it. But I think that's okay. I think I'd love to see a situation where the option exists for people, and I think that's the barrier that's existing currently, isn't it? Because we fall back as a profession on quite a typical kind of service model, which does exclude quite a lot of people. So as long as there's sufficient options out there for people to access, you know, some sort of transactional advice or different service models, that means when they want it, they can actually find it, then I think that's progress, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's kind of what we meant, isn't it? It's just everyone has the choice to have quality advice. Maybe I phrased the question wrong. You know, everyone should have the choice, and the barriers to entry should be, you know, I mean, hopefully will be lowered in the future. I think one of the main problems is that people just really don't have a comprehension about how much it's going to cost. You know, I would love to see a kind of survey on how many financial planning websites actually have a concrete figure for how much their fees are going to be. And don't get me wrong, I know why people don't display them on their website, because it's such a tricky area. But I think that could be potentially contributing to the issue in barriers to entry, because people just simply don't know how much it costs. And when you don't know how much something costs, you don't see it as a solution to you, because I don't even know if I can afford it.
Yeah.
So slightly moving on then. So part of being in a modern financial planning business is, I would imagine, focusing more seriously on green investing. And I've started to call it green investing recently because I've realized that by calling it ethical investing, you annoy some people. By calling it sustainable investing, you annoy other people. And by calling it anything else, responsible investing, you're always going to annoy people because there's solutions for all of those things.
Yeah.
So I'm using a blanket term of green investing, and I hope it catches on. So firstly, do you find that a lot of clients ask about this, or do you have a lot of conversations about this? And secondly, the second part of the question is, what ways have you found worked when talking to your clients about this type of investing?
Okay. So in SpringGen lingo, we do call it sustainable investing. So forgive me if I interchange between that and green. But we're all talking about the same thing, hopefully, broadly. So sustainable investing is the default for SpringGen. So I'm having that conversation with every single client, regardless. I tend to introduce it and talk about it from the kind of context of, we can make sustainable or green decisions about most aspects of our life now and our lifestyle. We can, we can be vegan or veggie, we can drive an electric car or use the bus, we can have solar panels on our house or just use a gas provider who uses renewable energy. We can, there's loads of choices that we can make in day-to-day life in that sphere. So it makes sense that we can also have a similar option when it comes to investing our money. And I think for most people, like, that kind of a logical extension of that argument. And 99.9% of the time, people are absolutely happy with it. They're totally on board. I'd say, the main area of pushback I get is from people that work in what I'm going to call the energy sector, which, being that I'm based in North East of Scotland, probably a lot of people can guess what I mean by that. So that tends to be the only real area of pushback that I get. And even that said, a lot of people who do work in the oil and gas industry are still keen to have this approach when it comes to their investments. So yeah, it's absolutely a topic on every single client meeting I have.
Interesting. It's cool. If we were to interview a more traditional financial planning firm, I would wonder if you say every, I wonder if any of the conversations for some traditional investing firms would have them in. But I mean, in previous conversations with people, we've kind of clarified that although it seems like it's an age thing, it's actually not that simple, because a lot of older clients are also asking about this as well and are concerned about this as well. So there's more to it than age, certainly, but I think the pattern is generally that the younger clients tend to want to talk about this a bit more. And there could be so many more different reasons for that. We just don't know. That's interesting what you just said. Okay, so when we think about the future of financial planning then itself, we'll still be here in 20 years' time, hopefully. I can't say if we'll both still be in financial planning, but you never know. By then we'll be too old, probably, actually, won't we? So we'll probably get out of the way for other people to take over. But what do you think that the future of financial planning will look like in, I'm going to say 20 years. I was going to say just the future, but let's just say 20 years' time. What do you think the future plan will look like?
I'd like to see a scenario where, I already kind of touched on this, but where there's a range of different services and companies set up to serve different kind of sections of the population. So where we're not all relying on the same service model to serve people. So hopefully by this point, people are going to have come up with lots of other lovely creative ways to, run a commercial business and be able to advise their certain niche of the population, and to include everyone from young to old. I'd love it to be more normal for people to seek financial advice at a younger age. I think it's still the exception. And for that to happen, I guess just needs to be a broader understanding of what financial advice is and that it exists as a service. And yeah, to normalise not everyone just relying on the same kind of percentage-based assets under advice approach.
Cool. I can tell you that there's definitely moves in that area, which is already started. From some of the conversations that I have with people, that is definitely on the way. I mean, it's a small percentage of people, but it is definitely being looked at, which is good. I think with this, if we think of a good way to look into the future is sometimes to look into what's happened in the past 20 years. And if we think of what the profession looks like today compared to what it looked like in 2002, that's a huge difference, a massive difference. Still a long way to go, don't get me wrong, but if we want to be optimistic about the future, it's sometimes good to look into the past as well and think of where we came from.
Yeah, totally.
If you want to kind of expand that, think about what the profession used to look like in the 1980s with maximum investment plans and, like you said, the man from the Prue and all that kind of stuff. We've come a long way. So never know where we could get to in 20 years' time, which is good. Sorry, that was your answer. I don't know why I said that. Let's close it down then. So regular feature on this podcast is we like to ask all of our guests for a book that has helped them in their career so far. I say career, I just mean life. And I say book, it doesn't have to be a book. If you're not much of a reader, it can be a podcast, it can be an album, it can be a movie. I don't know. I quite like Yes Man by Jim Carrey. So what have you got for us? What would you say has really kind of left its mark on you?
All right. Well, I've been boring and thought about books, but you've just, I'm going to sound really lame now. But for SpringGen specifically, the one book which really helped me, like right at the very beginning, the whole inception of the idea, when it was like floating around in my head, there's this book called She Means Business, which is by this woman called Carrie Green. I know it's called She Means Business, but it's not specifically for girls necessarily. But that book really, really helped me to kind of pin down, like I say, from like random ideas floating around in my head down to like, right, what is it I want to do? Why is it special? Like, what is different about it? What are my values and aims, and like, what's my mission? And all of these kind of like more specific things that you really need if you're going to launch something and also get other people behind something. Because it's flipping hard work, getting it from an idea to an actual business. And you really need to have those kind of things crystal clear not only in your mind, but actually written down, because you will go through times when like your motivation really ebbs, and you have to like remind yourself why you're doing it and what it's for and why it's a good idea. So you need those basic building blocks to be really strong. So it's not a financial planning book, it's just like an entrepreneur's kind of guide thing, but that just really helped me when I was brainstorming all that initial stuff. And then more financial planning-y, again, not necessarily specific to financial planning, but Matthew Syed, I just love his books. Rebel Ideas, Black Box Thinking, and there's another one I haven't read yet, but like he's just, the way he writes is just so interesting, and there's loads of like business ideas you can get from his books.
Awesome. I think on the She Means Business one, I completely agree with you about your vision, mission, values. And when we say that, we don't just mean 5 words in and plastic graphics on the wall when you come into reception. A vision and values and mission should be much more than that. Values realistically should be something that, and this is from Adam Owen, who works at NextGen. If there should be something that if they're taken away from you, it hurts. And if something hurts when it's taken away from you, that's one of your values, and that's fine to have. You can have that as business values, because that'll make you even more kind of entwined to actually do something in the future. Fantastic. Well, I've loved this conversation, Jenny. It's been so interesting. I feel really refreshed, which I feel a bit like one of your clients, like all refreshed after this meeting. So
That's good.
it's good. You leave a positive impact on people. It's nice. It's good to. I'm very optimistic about the future, which is good. So what we like to do in this podcast, we like to leave the last word or the last official word to our fantastic guests to say thank you for coming on the podcast. So can you tell our audience where to connect with you, where to find you? And I'm going to put you on the spot, but you don't have to answer this question if you don't want to. Leave us with some kind of motivation, and you don't have to answer that if you don't want to.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, in terms of where you can reach me, I am on LinkedIn. I'm active on LinkedIn, so it's Jenny Madhoo, or on the SpringGen website, which is springgen.co.uk. You can contact me through the normal contact page on there. And in terms of motivation, I mean, I guess I would just say, if you have an idea, something like this, don't be afraid to explore it more. And there's always multiple different avenues to launching something. I couldn't have imagined before I did it pitching the idea for a new business to my existing bosses, which is basically what I did back in 2019. And like I couldn't believe like the reception that I got. They were just so up for it. So, if even like a scattering of businesses around the UK could sort of offshoot something like that, how cool would that be?
Yeah, offshoot. That's a lovely imagery to use there, given SpringGen. That's perfect. Fantastic way to end. Thank you so much, Jenny. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today. So that was Jenny Madhoo from SpringGen Advice. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can share it on all social media platforms, including Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, and also on our website, nextgenplanners.co.uk, where you can find more information about the Next Gen Planners training contract, Advice Stack, the Future Leaders Program, all of our other programs and products, including the community, which Jenny is a wonderful member of. We've now got over 700 financial service heroes in there, and it's growing week by week, and the fantastic people in there as well. Check it out if you get a chance. And we do have the conference coming up in May and June this year. Virtual tickets will be going on sale shortly. The in-person conference is now at capacity, so there's no tickets left for that one, unfortunately, but the virtual conference will still be fantastic. So check that out when you get a chance. Thank you again to Jenny for coming on. Thank you guys at home for listening and watching, as always, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.